for one thing, I think DBSA has helped make it a greater Houston. An explanation for the box in front of me, without prepared remarks like this, it would be like taking a road trip without GPS. Who knows where we'd end up or how long it would take us to get there. So I do require these notes and the glasses that make the words appear. Yeah. It is great to be here. The last time I was here, it was a room full of Kappa Kappa Gammas. And we had more fun, and I didn't know I would so soon have an opportunity to come back. I will say the room is fuller today than it was then, but it's good to see some old friends again. After more than 30-year career in television, I'm kind of accustomed to hearing applause before I even say anything. But also to being recognized and engaged in conversations with strangers. Though I've noticed a subtle shift over the years. After the Jane Pauley show ended, for example, people would often ask, well, what are you doing now, Jane? And then after a couple of years, people started asking how I was enjoying retirement. This was kind of a heads up for me, because while I thought the Jane Pauley show might well be the end of my television career, I hadn't actually thought that it was the end of the line, but it had been a while. And then I was aware of a new pattern, that when strangers stopped me on the street, they didn't have a clue who I was. They didn't know where they were. They were asking directions. And then this happened. I was in Denver a week before last. I was having a burger on an outdoor patio at the Four Seasons Hotel. I was by myself, people watching. Absolutely nobody paid an iota of attention to me until the homeless man walked by, did a double take, and asked for my autograph. Change is the only constant in life, of course, and perhaps I am more comfortable with change than some. My husband calls me a change agent, which scares him sometimes. Another day, I might tell you the story about how I finally got my life in gear and created Your Life Calling, which is why I was in Denver doing a story for the Today Show. I do stories about people over 50 reinventing themselves. Props to AARP, which produces it, but I invented it. And last spring, perhaps some of you saw it, Costco magazine called me a reinvention evangelist. So while I may no longer be in prime time, I am now available in bulk. You laugh, but Costco magazine has a circulation of 20 million people. My sister Ann tells me that I have a gift for helping people see themselves in positive and powerful new ways. My children might quibble with calling this a gift. And this was a new way of seeing myself when she told me, but you know, I recognized it. It could have been a mission statement for the late Jane Pauley show, helping people see themselves in positive new ways. And Your Life Calling is about helping people reimagine their future in some positive new way. In particular, people over 50 or who will be, which is everyone, no generation before mine might have imagined reaching the age of 50 and still be actively thinking that there not only was more to come, but maybe even the best part. But I have not come to Houston to do my Your Life Calling thing, because obviously I have had to recalibrate more than my celebrity since I turned 50. Before I was 50, mental health was not on my radar. Well, in a way, I suppose it was. The president of NBC News once said that I had the best mental health in the business. And I wouldn't have said so, being Midwestern and all, but I, of course, concurred. Normal was practically my brand. I'm not kidding. I have clippings I could show you. But until I was diagnosed with bipolar 12 years ago, I doubt that I would have been part of an event like this, much less appearing at the podium. But my celebrity, such as it is these days, has enabled me to make the worst thing that ever happened in my life one of the best things about my life. I like to think of it as leveraging a diagnosis, but frankly, after today, I'm going to call it leveraging a diagnosis. My mission in my mental health advocacy is to help people see mental disorders in a powerful new way as treatable medical disorders, and to help people who struggle with these issues see themselves perhaps in a positive and powerful way. Sometimes it's just a matter of letting a person know, I see him, like that homeless guy in Denver, making a connection with him. It's almost a blessing to have a mission. And I don't think that before I had that diagnosis, I had a mission. You'll be very happy to know, particularly the professionals amongst you, that I don't make the mistake of confusing my experience with expertise, though people often ask me for advice. Now, you would think it's strange to ask for medical advice from either a celebrity or a mental patient. But they do. There's a certain dance that happens that kind of telegraphs where we're going. This will happen on the street, at the airport, at the mall. Someone will maybe touch me on my arm, and then we take a couple steps to the side, and I pretty much know that I'll hear something like, my son was just diagnosed, or my father was bipolar too. Typical was an exchange that happened after I had had my hair done. A woman followed me out of the salon. She said she wanted some advice. I was pretty sure I knew where the conversation was headed. She asked me if I thought she should get her hair cut or leave it long. But then, of course, she came to the point that I had been waiting for. She said she couldn't make decisions anymore. She was driving her husband crazy. She said, I think I might have what you have. Well, as I said, I don't give medical advice during my sidewalk office hours, but I do make referrals. And I suggested that she might feel more comfortable if she saw someone. And maybe a haircut would be nice. I'm accustomed to being celebrated for having the courage to talk about my experience with bipolar. But I'm thinking about the courage it took Lisa to stand here and talk about bipolar. I didn't have a family history. I didn't have any knowledge of it. So for me to talk about bipolar takes no courage. And I totally recognize the utter incongruity that the people who do the difficult work of caring for people who have issues of mental health probably hear applause about as often as my mother did. She was the organist at church. But once I was invited to speak in an awards ceremony where people who were working on the front lines once a year had a chance to get some acknowledgement. It was an organization up in Illinois that provided mental health care for indigent populations, really hard cases. One of these awards went to a woman who had clearly not expected it, and she arrived at the podium and said nothing for rather a long time, fumbling nervously at the microphone, until finally she said, "Well, I guess I'd like to thank the clients for giving purpose to my life." The whole room resonated with that idea, that her work gave her purpose. What a blessing to have the skills to help people try to work their way back into the community from the far fringes. And I do know how far away those fringes can feel. It was so moving. I remember her name. It was Joan. And I had the feeling that night that until the pressure of the moment produced that insight, Joan had never had that thought before. And that also in the pressure of the moment, I wondered if Joan might have been the only person in the room who hadn't actually heard what she said. So, helping people see themselves in positive new ways and all, being my gift, when it was my turn at the mic, I repeated it to her. My sister Anne, I mentioned before, once heard herself described as an irreplaceable crystal in a priceless chandelier. This is the kind of prose one doesn't expect in an executive setting, which is what this was. And I was kind of surprised that Anne knew what he was talking about. She had to explain it to me. My sister was the president of an Emerson Electric business. And she said that she always felt that her role on a leadership team was to help other people shine. She said that she didn't know that this had been noticed or even that it was particularly valuable, but being described publicly as an irreplaceable crystal in a priceless chandelier was more than just flattering. She said it was validating, and that this validation had translated into greater confidence to deploy the skill but work, but also in a broader context in her community, and she said especially her church. So I hoped that Joan's award was validating, and that her insight, that her clients gave purpose to her life, was validating for lots of other people in that hall. And perhaps even here to people in the room with us today, the Depression and Bipolar Alliance of Greater Houston. Your innovative peer-facilitated support group model really is innovative and so powerful. Many of you know this, but there is substantial research that shows that giving support is as powerful as getting support. And so I am doubly blessed to have the opportunity to stand at a podium like Gary has had many times. It's an opportunity for me to give support and to get it. It's like a booster shot to my own well-being. My story, I'll try to make a real long story real short. My doctor recognized the symptoms of hypomania after I had been 10 months on medication to treat hives, the kind that cause swelling, that had me in the ER twice with a throat swelling up. You don't think about hives as being potentially fatal, but when your throat is swelling up, they do something serious for you. And steroids was a treatment of choice. Steroids are notorious for mood swings. The up I rather enjoyed, the down not so much. I kind of got stuck on the downside. The doctor prescribed antidepressants, thinking he was dealing with the side effects of steroids, a garden variety case of unipolar depression. And by garden variety, he did not mean to imply it was safe. Depression is a fatal disease, potentially. Finally, it was months later, but finally I started feeling better and better. And you can't see it, but there's a big exclamation point after that, better. Felt better than I'd felt in my life. Oddly, the better I felt, the more alarmed my husband seemed to become. Gary didn't know what was going on. Finally, my doctor did. He recognized that he had not been looking at a case of unipolar depression, but bipolar. They are very different animals, but both beasts. He told me I seemed to be racing. He said something about hoping for a soft landing. He called my husband to say, "Your wife is very sick." Obviously, normal would no longer be my brand. There was no known history of mental health, of mental illness in my family, even to this day. But everyone knows that family history and family secrets can sometimes cover the same territory. The first evidence that I had had a genetic vulnerability to bipolar disorder was that the meds for hives and the antidepressants triggered that episode of hypomania. But whenever it happened, there was no reversing it. There was no going back. I was bipolar and was going to be for the rest of my life. But as you see, I could still have the rest of my life. 6 months later, I went back to work. Somewhat reluctantly, I'll admit. It was a Monday. The next day was Tuesday, September 11th. At that point, the whole country was reeling from unrecognized vulnerabilities. So I rather fit right in. It's been 12 years. I've not had a second episode. That doesn't mean I won't. Anything I can do to prevent one, I will do. My doctor knows that he'll hear from me if I'm not sleeping well. Dysregulated sleep is the #1 thing. It can either trigger an episode or be evidence that an episode is trying to push its way through. I've been on the road a lot lately. I've been busy. We are keeping a weather eye on my sleep right now. I am careful to travel with my meds. Never any holidays. Once a mother told me with pride and relief that her son was doing a lot better and that they were looking forward to him being able to go off his meds. And I took both of her hands in mine and I said, our goal is not getting off the meds. Our goal is preventing a recurrence of an episode. Staying on meds, despite not having had a recurrence yet, is what enables me to have a normal life. Finding the right meds, God knows, is a trial and error process, and it can sometimes take years to get it right. And then there can be the frustrating side effects. I'm told that the one reason for that is that what we call bipolar may one day be recognized as a variety of different diseases, so that what works for one person might not work for another because they don't have the same thing. There's still so much to learn. As an analogy, and this was a really hopeful story, I think, for all of us in this room, even though the topic was breast cancer, the implications apply to us as well. In the paper last week, there was a story about a breakthrough in the genetic understanding of breast cancer tumors, that they had recognized 4 distinct different genetic differences. And the importance of that was in recognizing the differences. The treatment now for this cancer can be targeted effectively by knowing that it's not that cancer, that same ability to recognize the difference of a disease holds great promise in the future of getting the right person matched with the right treatment. In the meantime, it's tough, it's frustrating. My doctor tells me that I have insight as a patient. I'm alert to my signals. Am I talking too fast? Am I talking too loud? Am I talking too much? If my insights start arriving in swarms, I'll know we're in trouble. Or maybe I won't know we're in trouble, but someone will. I'm on the verge of talking out of my depth here. It is simply important to repeat and understand that unipolar depression, bipolar depression are both very serious but treatable medical disorders. My mission is to change the way we talk about them. I propose that we stop talking about stigma. That event I mentioned with Joan up in Illinois, for instance, I was there to give a keynote speech, and I had been giving the director of this wonderful organization a preview of my remarks and telling him how strongly I felt about stigma. Of course, I feel that it is unfair, that it is ignorant, that it is unjust, it's real, it's a bully, and I'm against it. But as I told him, the word stigma made me feel so much worse. I told him about how my well-meaning doctor, the day I was diagnosed, helpfully offered me a cover story I might tell NBC. Suddenly, there was an 800-pound gorilla in the room with us. This was my first, and I really think my only, brush with stigma. He didn't even have to say the word, and I knew what he was talking about. It was a reminder, oh yeah, I'm supposed to feel embarrassment or shame, but I didn't. That's when I broke the news to my poor doctor. I told him I was already at work writing a memoir, and with the title Skywriting,